This is Intelligence, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. Prepare yourself for unfiltered social commentary, along with cross-cultural, multi-dimensional, and unique perspectives, making for the most dynamic content you've ever experienced. With your hosts, Brennan Dunn, Charles Sherrard Jr., Damon Parrish II, and Dr. Rod Singleton. Join us as we discuss pop culture, sports, politics, and much, much more. Get ready. It starts right now.
Welcome back to another edition of Intelligence. I'm your host, Brennan Dunn. We've got an awesome show lined up for you today. We got some very special guests I want to bring to your attention starting right now. We're going to start with Sahar Paz. She is the author, speaker, and CEO of Own Your Voice Communications. How are you, Sahar?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
All right. Tell us real quickly what exactly Own Your Own Voice is.
Own Your Voice is a personal branding firm with a mission to get speakers on stages, especially those that are conscious capitalists.
Awesome. Our next special guest is the self-proclaimed People's Criminal Defense Attorney, Jason Sosa. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing all right. It's not self-proclaimed. It's proclaimed.
Oh, the proclaimed.
Yeah.
Okay, the people have spoken, basically.
That's true, sir.
Fair enough. Jason, glad to have you on here. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Thomas Nguyen. He is the Chief Marketing Officer and part owner and partner in Peli Peli Restaurant. That's a South African cuisine restaurant, isn't it?
That's right, and we are the people's champ.
Oh. Well, we got a lot of people in here, right? Huh?
Yeah.
All right.
We've always tried to win the People's Choice Awards at all the food events, and so
Nice.
that's why I think we can proclaim that, because we're here for the people, not for the judges. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's pretty awesome. So later on in the show, we're going to be talking about minority diversity and minority relations. So that's why we have such a diverse panel with us here today. So can't wait to get started. But first, we're going to jump right into Seattle. Seattle recently just made a decision to throw out the last 15 years worth of marijuana convictions. And I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. We don't have Dr. Rod in here today, but we do have Quentin, our resident fill-in, here to talk about this. And Quentin, you look like a kind of person that likes to partake in God's herb. How you feel about this?
Man, honestly, I think it's awesome. I think we long overdue for criminalizing people for marijuana convictions. So, big ups to Seattle for being that gate opener, and hopefully the trend follows with some of these other states.
So the judges have taken it upon themselves to kind of act. Jason, do you think that this was some? Why 15? Why not like 20? Why not just say, you know what? If you've ever been convicted and you are still alive, we're just going to knock it out.
I think it's too late. I mean, that's the first thing. When I was reading everything about this, I was like, okay.
For the lost time, financial, or what do you mean?
Be productive in
Or
the
maybe
community.
give them a avenue or path into the
So do you guys think that they're doing it on the misdemeanor level, which means that they're doing it for smaller amounts of marijuana? Should there really be a difference between large and small amounts, Sahar?
Well, I grew up in Colorado, which was the first.
One thing that I really wish, they're doing it for marijuana usage and saying, I think just because they've now legalized marijuana, at least statewide, they've legalized marijuana, but it's still a federal issue. However, I feel like the only reason they're doing it is because there's some capital gain for the state at this point. For people who have issues with, I don't know, cocaine addiction, heroin addiction, there's still an issue with those particular individuals. We got 3 criminal defense attorneys in the room today. Should we really be focusing on criminalizing drug behavior, or should there be a different type of way of dealing with this in terms of maybe some kind of civil issue, mandating drug treatment, or putting them in certain facilities that are not necessarily prisons and jails? Is arose by any other name, but there's still a difference between a criminal record versus, the outcome. The process might be the same. You're held involuntarily, but at the end of the day, there's certainly a difference between having the tag of felon at the end of your name versus saying, yeah, I went through a drug treatment program. That's something that won't follow you the same way that criminal tag will.
So I agree with you on that one, and I would actually.
Quantity, that amount, someone's guarding that amount. And then there's a danger attached to that. Now, if we're talking about just regular misdemeanor stuff, I'm on the same page. I also like your point about smaller felonies, like PCS less than a gram cases here in Texas. I think right now, as a citizen in this community, I think we're doing a really good job in trying to help best we can right now. We're not perfect at it, right? So there are courts in our system right now that are just for those less than a gram offenses, and they're expanding it to larger amounts, just so long as there's not a avenue of dealing, or et cetera. But you are right. You can't lead a horse to water and make it drink.
Right.
But for a long time, citizens have always said, we haven't put our best foot forward to fund programs to help people. Now through these courts, they're trying to do that. If the person doesn't take, they don't take. We've given them opportunities. And in these courts, it's not like a one-strike-you're-out opportunity. I've seen some of these courts go to lengths to keep these citizens without having felonies on their record or multiple felonies on their record. And I agree with Brennan saying, hey, let's not put a felony on the record. Let's at least give them an opportunity for treatment on their record. Because then we can follow that treatment and say, hey, look, this one didn't work the first time. Let's see if we got something better that will fit that individual, rather than, hey, everybody go to the hospital down the street. They got drug rehab, because it's not all the same.
So here's the only reason why here's the one thing you say I disagree with.
Shoot.
The usable quantity of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
If it's legal, it's legal. I mean, you can have there's no such thing as a usable quantity of alcohol in your house, or a usable quantity of cigarettes in your house, right?
I agree.
If you want to have a fully stocked bar from tip to back, front door to back door, nobody's going to stop you. ATF might come look at you, make sure you're not selling it, right?
True.
But as long as you got it properly legally, they're not going to stop you. Same with cigarettes. And I think if you decriminalize marijuana, you take out that guarding aspect because everybody has it. So I don't have to go rob you of your marijuana. I have to go to a store and get my own marijuana and whatever.
I think when you do that, man, you create. This is what I believe. I believe they want to limit the amount because now you create a competition for the federal government. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what it's all about. Because at the end of the day, I don't think we've seen where marijuana is a bad thing, where it's causing people to go out here and do just ridiculous things, right, or losing their lives. People are losing their lives daily. So I feel like there's another alternative to why there's so much scrutiny on how much you can have, and it's legal here, it's illegal here. That's just my opinion.
I mean, quite honestly, I think this is just a trade-off on money. Everything in America always boils down to the dollar bills. As long as they can make money in some shape, form, or fashion, the government is okay. So before, they were making money off the prison system. And as people fought for the right to freely use their marijuana, they have to transition over and say, okay, well, we're going to start making this a capital gain for marijuana sales. So we'll start to decrease the amount of marijuana conviction rates going on. I'm sure by the time it becomes federally legal, they will have taken an even greater stance on it in terms of the freedom of criminalization or backlogging those criminal histories. But right now, it's still a matter of, does it make dollars? Does it make sense for me? And I mean, we can talk all day long about the philosophical points on marijuana usage, but the mighty dollar is all that matters when it comes to the federal government. The federal government still seems to be hypocritical in the way it does things. So are our school systems, and teachers are being fired for what seems to be ridiculous reasons. There's a South Florida teacher that alleges that she was fired after she refused to give a student a 50% grade on her homework that was not turned in. A Port St. Lucie teacher, Diana Tirado, said students should not get credit for work they have not done. The school has said that they don't have that policy in place, but we all know that there are hidden rules and unspoken of policies that are followed all the time. This goes back to a discussion, Damon, you and I have had in the past about raising weaklings, so to speak. This whole everybody gets a trophy type thing. I mean, what do you think about this, Thomas? I mean, are we heading in a direction where we are becoming too politically correct and sensitive at this point?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I was raised in an Asian household, so for me, like when everyone else was getting, presents and stuff for getting B's, I was getting whooped. Wait,
hold on. They whooped Asian kids?
I did get whooped.
For a B?
For a B. Oh yeah, I did get whooped for a C. A B. I mean, this is not a joke. I mean, this. I mean, we joke about it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad beat me, but he cried and he explained to me like why he was beating me. And so for me, I know not everyone agrees with it, but
So this is why y'all stay on the honor roll. See, they whoop us for like stealing the candy. They whoop y'all for getting C's. That's the difference.
Well, because my parents came from Vietnam, right? So for them, it's like they almost died to come over to this country. So
the least you can do is go to a home.
Exactly, and to them, they've always looked at it as like this is not our country, and I can go on about that, but for them, they're like, man, if you want to survive, you can't play. You don't have the same rights. You don't have the same opportunities as everybody else. That's how my mom raised me. Is I don't know what's going to happen in this world, and you better take advantage of every opportunity. So you can't slack like your friends can slack, because you're not going to get the same opportunities that they get. And that's how I was raised. So going back to your point, I mean, to me, it's just funny how I feel bad for teachers now, because how do you teach these days? I mean, God forbid you say some, do some. I mean, the parents are going to get mad at you. Yeah. It used to be the kid. Yeah. Now it's the parents. Like, why aren't you giving my kid an A? As opposed to like, what can I do to get my child to get A's? Right? I think that's changed. I don't have kids, so luckily I don't have to deal with it. But I feel bad for parents. Not only parents these days, how raising kids in this environment, but obviously to be a teacher in this environment, I don't even know how you.
I agree with you. Sahar, guys will always say, when we go out on the football field, we go play basketball, it's feast or famine, win or lose. There is no in between. You either get the trophy. There's no such thing as a participation thing. But a lot of guys, right? A lot of guys will say, it's not us that are pushing for this equality in sports or equality in competition thing. It's our female counterparts saying that we need to be more sensitive to the needs. This is a psychological. There's psychological damage being done when you don't encourage mediocrity. And what do you think about that?
So, two things. When No Child Left Behind really messed up teachers, because teachers had to teach to the test. Yeah. So you got to give me the score so I can get this money for this school. Yes. Right? All right. So I'm teaching to the test, and I'm not really thinking about the individual in front of me and what I need to teach them to make them succeed. And so I'm going to have to give you that 50% so this school can get money. And then as far as, making sure that there's gender equality, I don't know if we're moving into the girl on the football team. I love her on that football team.
I mean, we might as well talk about it since you brought it up. You're doing my job now. I don't want you to take my job from me.
I don't want to. I don't know. I didn't know if you were bringing that up. But both of them is a mental issue. Like, you're going to rise to what I enable you to rise. If I say it's okay for you to get 50% to do nothing, that's what you're going to do. If I'm going to say, hey, you're a girl, so you got to play flag football, but you can't put this helmet on, that's what you're going to expect. So you're going to rise to what I expect of you. And that's what I'm talking about.
Gonna rise to what I expect. What if you expect your child to be slow? Do you
don't need to be a parent.
What kind of parent are you? I mean, come on now. I feel like parents really know if they got a dumb kid. Sir, you should know if your child ugly. And you should know if your child is dumb. Wow. Those are two things you should really just know.
Sir, Jay-Z has Beyonce. Nobody saw that one coming.
But Jay-Z is overcoming. And you know what I'm saying? There's a difference between just struggling through life and say, you know what, I'm going to take matters into my own hands and become a rapper. Well, it just is what it is.
But you can't fix physical.
He's not Lil Wayne.
Are you speaking from experience?
I mean, he's still like 6'6", the big guy. Lil Wayne, that's tough.
So Brennan, there's another side to this in that there actually might be some solid backing to not failing kids. Children. Maybe we have been too hard. Maybe we all grew up in an era where we got beat for everything. And I got spanked too, not for bad grades though, thank God. But I got spanked also, and so maybe trying a different approach. We live in an era now where kids are really sensitive for whatever reason, and they do more. And so maybe the school is saying, hey, we're going to try this, and it might not work. It might fall apart, but we don't know though. There's not enough data to see it's not working. Basically, what they're saying is, all they said is a 0 is now a 50. It's still failing, right? I mean, you still fail, so a 50 is not good. All they did was say a 0 is now a 50, and whether that means that a child will learn that they can do nothing and still get halfway there, I don't know. But they just raised the floor to 50 but it's still a failure. So there might be some merit behind that.
It's not really sensitive. It's about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So what's my lane? If I know that I'm not meant for college, let me go to trade school and know I'm going to be the best at that.
I tell you what,
let me not go to school and get under a car. Like, what is your lane? What is your strength? What is your purpose? And I want you to rise to more than 50% of that purpose.
Yeah. Okay. What we doing now ain't working because these kids out here eating Tide Pods, man. I mean, it ain't working. But I do agree 100% with her. I think that's one thing that we need to take a stronger look at, because we try to force every kid through the same avenue. Yes. But you have people that are mechanically inclined. You have people that are art inclined, musically inclined. And I think we should cater to that, because I know I hated school when I was going there because it wasn't interesting to me. Now, when I went to college and I actually got into mechanical engineering, then it sparked my interest, because it was something that I actually look forward to doing. But in high school, man, everybody's doing the same thing, but everybody's not the same person. So I feel like there's value in what she's saying, that we should probably cater more to that type of education than what we're doing now.
You know, one of the things that we have to struggle with dealing with education is how far should the should school standards be implemented for individual students. And one of the things that recently came up was a young student, India Landry. She, at the time that she was 17, she was in a Texas school, Winfern High School, right outside of Houston. All the students got up to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and she sat down. She was kicked out of school for it. Later, they reinstated her, but there's a lawsuit going on. I mean, this is something where the Texas legislature has actually, it's a law that says that you must stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. There have been a number of different states, including Indiana, that have joined in mandating that standing for students. This kind of goes with our diversity thing that we're going to be talking about later on in minorities. One, should people really be forced to pledge allegiance to their? I mean, you're born here, yeah. Yes. Or for those who proposition to become citizens or request to become citizens, I can see saying, hey, you got to pledge your allegiance to the country that you're actually asking to be a part of. But for those of us who are born here, I mean, should you have to be forced to pledge allegiance? So, I mean, I didn't ask to be born here. Maybe I don't want to be a proud, quote unquote, American. Maybe I don't agree with everything that my America's doing. So why should I be pledging such loyalty to a place that doesn't reflect loyalty towards me?
What?
You don't understand which part of that?
I don't understand that, but I mean, so school is about doing things you don't want to do anyways. I mean, you go to school, most kids
That's a terrible argument.
Well, let me finish, sir. You be quiet. So most kids go to school, they don't want to learn, they don't want to be there, but you go anyways. You go to learn. I don't see the problem at all with making people say the pledge. I mean, you're at school,
especially in a public school.
In a public school. I mean, now if you have a religious reason, I'm all for religion for religious reasons saying you can't do it, right? And so for that reason, sure, but you don't have a right to protest in school, at least not like that.
Somebody get David a MAGA hat.
You've been listening to too much Kanye, sir.
Yeah, all power, yeah. But what I'm saying is, you go to school, you say, I'm going to pledge allegiance, or at least stand there and fake it. I don't think you don't. I'm not comfortable yet with giving. Or saying
we're giving children the freedom to think.
Freedom of speech, right to protest doesn't exist in schools.
So. I think we got to take a look at it in segments, in pieces, right? We're trying to chew the whole damn elephant's ass here. I mean, you can't do that, right?
Is that a Hispanic saying, sir? I don't know it. I've never heard that before. Right.
That's a Texas saying.
That's a West Texas thing.
West Texas. Texas forever. But anyways, I think you got to break it down, right? I mean, I agree with Damon. Right, I agree with his points to a certain extent. We have young children, right? We're all about learning rules, learning how to do things right, walk in a straight line, go whatever it may be, because that's why you go to school, because it's part about building citizenship, building all these values, and it may not be the right values the parents want taught, maybe, but it's in a public school, so that's what you're getting. If you want something different, you take them to a private school or magnet school, whatever it may be. But at some point in time, a young man and a young woman, or a young woman, is going to have that intellectual thought within their own mind and say, hey, look, I don't know if I agree with this. And I think it's appropriate for the young lady to say, hey, I'm going to step out, I'm going to sit down, I'm not going to bother anybody else in the classroom to do what they want to do. Now, if she's acting the fool, that's different. But she's being respectful, sitting down, letting other people to me, we should applaud her because her intellect is probably 2 to 3 years past than her peers because she's like, I'm thinking about how to do this peacefully, one. Second, how do I make a statement? And third, man, 17 years old, man, people are like, what's wrong with you? You know, you may be shunned through lunch period. You may be shunned for the rest of the week because you did something different than anybody else.
Right.
But until you're an adult, do you realize, like, that person made a statement, and I respect that. So I think you gotta break it down.
Speak on it,
Respectfully.
brother.
I mean,
No, it's not.
Ain't no respect.
I mean, to me, it's all about the is it the right form or not? You know, obviously, if you have a 17-year-old, you have the right to speak your mind. But to me, public school, this is an opportunity. It's a privilege for you to go to school. They're paying for you to have an education. If you don't want to do that, don't go to school. Go protest. Go whatever you want to do, and go wait till you get home. Get on YouTube. Say what you want to say. Do whatever protest you want to do, and go to the mall. Do whatever you want to do. But at school, to me, maybe just the opportunities for me, like kind of being in this country for my parents. I mean, I look at that's a value. That's not a given. It's a public school forum. That is not the right forum, in my opinion, to make this kind of protest because this is something you're given. It's a privilege to have that opportunity. Now, if it's a private school and your parents pay for it, I could see that argument, right?
They indirectly do pay for it, right? And it's not
taxes.
and it's not like she did something that took away from the education component.
But it's still the policies of that public school.
Well, one thing you said that triggered me was the fact that you said it's a privilege. Public school is a privilege. I don't see education in America as being a privilege. I see it as a fundamental right. You have a fundamental right to education here in this country. So if I have the right to be educated, it kind of takes out the fact that, I should be so grateful. Thank you, Mr. Uncle Sam, for allowing me this education that you're giving me. I just don't. I see it more like along the lines of Jason, where you want us to be thinking citizens. You want us to be the kind of citizens who progress the country. Because without progression, we have a static nation. And with a static nation comes the same policies, or sometimes even retroactive policies that put us back into the dark ages of American society. Mm-hmm. If we're not fighting for progress, then we're not fighting really for anything. And I think that type of mentality, the one where you're saying, be thankful, be grateful, is the same thing that I hate to go back to it. The Colin Kaepernicks of the world is sitting there saying, know your role. There's a time and a place. Well, when is the time and the place for you to say that you don't agree with your country at this point? No, you got to agree with it during school. But after school, you can go ahead and disagree with us. I just don't see that being the appropriate way to assert myself as an American citizen.
I guarantee you, she did it at home on YouTube, because you brought up YouTube too, whatever. Guaranteed, it gets put on YouTube. She's doing her thing. She gets suspended anyways.
Yeah.
Because somebody said, "Oh, did you see such a?" They're
she
passing
goes
the
to this
phones
school.
around.
Yeah.
And then she's getting it's the same.
Maybe, but I agree with what Thomas said. I think it's a you have to shift your paradigm, Brennan. It is a fundamental right here, but to those outside this country, education is a pure privilege.
But we're not outside this country.
However, what we consider to be a fundamental right is actually, to most people, a pure privilege. You get a privilege of a free education from kindergarten to 12th grade, and you get a privilege to learn. And so while you're here, take advantage of that privilege, because not everybody's blessed like we are to be in a place where we have a free public school system to get it. So, you say the pledge. And then to the next point, Brennan, you talk about being a good student and protesting to be good for your country, but so is being a good citizen and knowing the pledge, knowing your history, knowing where it came from, and reciting that. It's part of national pride, which is nothing wrong with national pride to say the pledge.
But if you don't want to be prideful, why should you have to told to
Did
be
you see
prideful?
lean on me? There's no privilege of going to East Side High.
Like there's
I know fair East Side.
I'll tell you.
there's no when you say like, oh, we gotta you have to be thankful for learning. What you standing up saying the Pledge of Allegiance has nothing to do with education that you
That's
have.
what I want
You
to
know,
say.
you're sitting up there when it's time, when the teacher says, all right, students, open up your books. All right, cool. I'll shut up and open up my book. When the teacher says, all right, y'all, stand for this Pledge of Allegiance, where you're telling, you have to stand with your right hand over your heart and say, I pledge allegiance to this flag of the United States of America. I don't want to do that. I'll sit here respectfully and not say anything for those who choose to do that, but I shouldn't have to be forced. That has nothing to do with the education that I'm receiving.
You're wrong, because part of your education is not just arithmetic, reading, and science. It's also civic duty. You learn about being a citizen of the country, in the country you're in.
Yes.
So it's not limited to just the core fundamentals. It's also inclusive of civic nature in this. So maybe if people set the pledge, we can get more jurors for jury service. Maybe that could be the case. Who knows what that kind of national pride can lead to? So that's why I agree with Thomas on that one.
Sahar, you're nodding your head while everybody's talking. What do you think on this?
I can't help. Okay, it was 1986. Here I come from Iran to the United States, and I am in my elementary school, and I have to take the pledge, and I'm repeating these words, but I'm repeating them in my brain. It is an honor. Listen, in Iran, as a girl, education was taken from me, by my voice taken from me. Like, I completely understand that it is a privilege. However, when I'm repeating that allegiance, it's just words. It's my head. I don't feel the community in my heart. Now, what if after that's done and we say, okay, let's talk about the real community here. Let's talk about what we have here. Where did you come from? What do you eat at the dinner table? Can you bring that to school and let us break bread together? What is the reality of the community? When I learn history, don't show me just the white face, show them all to me.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So, allegiance, yes. Community, yes. Privilege, hell yes. Community, consciousness, I don't see it.
I agree with that, man. I feel like we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then when it's over, everybody goes back to their corners and just hate on each other. So what's the point? I don't really see the value in it. Now, I understand as a citizen of America, and you're here, respect it. Like he mentioned, sit quietly till it's over or do what you need to do. But I feel like right now there's much more value in teaching people about finances and things like that. Let's put that time towards things that can actually create better citizens in the future, because everybody knows the Pledge of Allegiance. The prison is full of people who know the Pledge of Allegiance. So, I mean, what is the real value of knowing that?
I got one more thing to say. I think we're talking about education, right? Yeah. And if someone is choosing to do something, then why didn't the teacher in this situation choose to educate? Instead of saying, you're out of here.
Just write you up.
Just get out, you're out of here.
Yeah.
Why don't you choose, as an educator, to take that teaching moment and sit down with your classroom and say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's have a classroom discussion. Yeah. And I understand your perspective. I understand your perspective that when parents get involved, sometimes like, oh, why did y'all have that classroom discussion? But again, that's where a school, your counselors, your principals get behind that teacher and say, that teacher did the right thing and had a teaching moment. Now our school is better for it. Our children are better for it. And hopefully our community is better for it.
I agree with you. I mean, I just don't see, to Damon's point, I'm not going to go back and forth on this anymore because I think we beat it with like a dead horse. You know what I'm saying? But
on the elephant's ass.
but at the end of the day, I don't see how if I'm being taught American history, Texas history, whatever the history, all right, I've learned it. If you give me the choice of standing up, I now have I was taught that America is a place of free will and freedom of speech and freedom to make decisions within the confines of the law. I shouldn't have to then be told, well, even though you're free to do what you want to do to a certain degree, you still have to do this whole Pledge of Allegiance type thing. I just don't agree with that. But
let me add one thing real quick.
Yes, sir.
So last weekend I got OCA, Organization of Chinese Americans, gave me an award for outstanding Asian. And
are you just gonna throw that out there? I'm the most outstanding Asian in Houston.
My wife was like, "What the fuck does that mean? You're just outstanding in the community, whatever." The point is, in the very beginning, they made us do the pledge to the American flag and to the Texas flag. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I'm thinking back, I was like, "Well, this," but I did it naturally, But for me, they did it because to remind everyone in that room to show some respect for the country that we live in and the state that we live in, right? Whatever your beliefs are, whatever, there's Republicans, Democrats, it didn't matter at that point. Regardless, let's not shame the fact that we're in this beautiful country, no matter how messed up it is.
No.
Shows some level of honor and respect for the fact that we're here and we have these opportunities. And so to that point, it's hard for me to say that, there's no value in the pledge. Because I'm like every kid. I was like, everyone goes through that. But I think that also sticks with us, too. As we get older, we start understanding, like, why did we say that? Like, what do the words mean? Why do we do this? And last weekend, I was like, you know what? I was like, wow, we're still doing this. This is pretty cool.
I want to come back. I want you to remind me of that later on in the show, because that's what you just said actually brings up a question for me in terms of how different minorities view their place in this country. And we'll talk about that later on in the show, but somebody remind me of that.
Won't be me.
I don't have any faith in you anyway. It is what it is. You love me, sir.
That's true.
All right, Facebook. Facebook just had a security issue over the weekend. Over 50 million users purported to have been possibly hacked. Their accounts may have been compromised, and matter of fact, I think it was Sunday, or it was either Saturday or Sunday. Was it? So yesterday, it was Sunday.
You had to relog in.
I had to relog into my account because I'm like, well, I didn't kick myself out. Then I got nervous. I'm like, is an X up here, hacking in? I'm like, oh Lord, what am I going to do now? But it makes me wonder. And I mean, Facebook lost some stock dollars because of this. Are we so inextricably intertwined within our social media accounts that we are actually posing a danger to ourselves?
Yeah, I think some people are, man. Like I don't put like credit cards, and I don't do all that crap, personal phone numbers and stuff. But I think some people, like, Facebook really is their life, and they have very secretive information on there that can impact their lives if the wrong person got a hold of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think, you shouldn't put anything on Facebook that you wouldn't want just out in the street anyways, right? It's a completely public forum. Anybody can see it, whether you intend to it or not. They re-update their policies every 6 months to make what was private now public, and you have to remake it private again. I don't, Facebook is fun for chat rooms and sharing pictures and funny stories and that kind of crap. You shouldn't buy anything on it. And in my opinion, if you have a Facebook account, it should have its own completely separate password and login and everything. At least mine does. Like, no other account do I have uses my Facebook account password. So having to change it doesn't bother me any, because it's just there for fun. I mix no business with Facebook. It is all pleasure.
All pleasure?
All pleasure.
Right now.
The comments going to be lit. All this pleasure you got going on Facebook.
Chat rooms you were talking about.
Yeah.
So you hear that, Miss Parrish? All he wants you to wear is Facebook tonight. It is what it is.
Arms up, baby.
Speaking of arms up, we got over in Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall proposed several policy changes within the department. One of the issues that they had was that it took 48 hours before they even released Amber Geiger's name. That's the shooter of Botham Jean in that fatal mistaken apartment shooting. Another thing was it took 72 hours for them to even question Officer Geiger, or former Officer Geiger at this point, because of policies within the Dallas Police Department. I know a lot of people were upset, saying, well, why haven't they questioned her yet? They gave her 72 hours in which to create this affidavit that was supposed to be airtight, but still full of Swiss cheese holes. And they gave her an opportunity to do everything under the sun that she needed to do to prepare herself for the eventuality of having to speak to police officers. I'm frustrated by the fact that we give so much deference to police officers when they have been alleged to have committed crimes, and they're given the type of deference that as a citizen non-police officer we could only dream of having. I don't understand why there has to be a demarcation line between officers and civilians when it comes to the justice system. Shouldn't we all be on the same slate?
So there actually are 3 lines of demarcation in criminal justice. There's rich, there's poor, and there's law enforcement. The law enforcement line is amazingly beautiful if you're within the system, right? You're policed by your own people, so it's your own colleagues who are going to question you for whatever reason. They give you have access to lawyers up front, and they tell you, hey, listen, don't say anything until you get your lawyer. And then on the DA side of it in Harris County, or at least in Texas, any kind of indictment, grand jury indictment, the cops usually get to be there, at least in Harris County, with their lawyer, which no other person will get. No other person gets that right but lawyers. To have a lawyer sit with you in the middle of a grand jury proceeding and advise you in the middle of that. Nobody else gets that but cops. So it is not fair, and it does create a sense that they are above the law, that they're supposed to protect us. It also creates a problem. So then when cops commit a crime, who investigates cops? Is it more cops? Is it civilians? I get we need to make a change to that, but what does that change look like?
Well, I mean, there's supposed to be an internal affairs that investigates cops, but it's more cops policing cops.
It's a group of my friends who are in this part of the law enforcement, who are in this division. I don't think a lot of people.
But shouldn't there be an honor though? I mean, shouldn't there be honor amongst police officers? At the end of the day, that's like a judge saying we give the judges the power to recuse themselves. Saying, you petition a judge and say, hey, judge, I think that you might be biased in this. And the judge gets to make the determination. I don't think I'm biased. We're going to move forward. And that's what happened. Actually, what happened with Cosby's case, which we'll talk about here in a second. At some point, do we have to trust these police officers to have honor amongst thieves, so to speak?
No. Because I'm going to tell you, if I'm a police officer and I commit a crime and I know I might be facing life in prison, what do you think I'm going to do when they ask me if I think if I should go to jail or not? Hell no. I'm not signing myself up to go to prison for life. So why you would never give a civilian that opportunity to say whether they think they should be punished or how they think they should be punished for this crime. So you're a cop. You chose that path. You chose that career. So at the end of the day, you have to be held accountable just like anybody else. Like that's there's no way that you could trust that somebody's going to make the right call if they're given the power themselves of whether they're going to police themselves. Like,
I'm going to go slightly against the grain on this one. Just slightly.
That's okay. Bite that elephant in the ass.
I'm a hammer by the tail right now. But here's what I say. I agree with the policy that she's putting in place, getting rid of the 72 hours, because 72 hours, you can fix a lot of shit in 72 hours. Bro. I wish some of my clients could get 72 hours before having to speak to an officer. But here's what I will say, is I think what she's trying to do is instill some trust in her officers, because you're right, officers are going to investigate officers, but there are officers that will go and do the right thing. I mean, take, for example, a little slightly different is the young man up in Dallas where the police officer shot into that car full of young men.
Yeah.
His partner was right there and said, no, it didn't go down the way he's saying it's going down.
Jordan Edwards.
Right. Yeah. And he said, no, I'm doing the right thing. I may be ostracized from the force. There may be people that may look at me differently. But that young man wasn't putting the car in reverse to run over my partner.
Well, what if he was the one that pulled the trigger? Do you think he would have done the same thing against himself?
So that's the hard thing. I think that's the trust building, right? And we're never going to ever get to 100% trust. Because as an individual, I don't 100% trust anybody except for my mom, right? But you got to start somewhere, and I think this is a good start. I mean, because, man, 72 hours, man, you could fix a whole case in 72 hours if you got the right attorneys with you, right? To guide you and to say, hey, look, don't say this, keep your mouth shut. If they don't find it, that's on them.
Especially if the cops tip you. Like, if you're a cop and they give you, here's what we got.
Right.
Like, tell me your response to it. It's like,
and I love what one of the officers who was against the police chief, he said, man, these investigators are going to have a heyday with my officers. I mean, like, well, because you have a heyday with everyday citizens when they commit something. I mean, come on. So what's good for the goose,
But I mean, don't you think that one of the things that frustrated me most about this was not an officer doing the shooting. For all intents and purposes, this was a civilian shooting another person because this was an off-duty officer, which to me means she shouldn't have been given any of the leniency that an officer gets in an officer-involved shooting
because she wasn't on duty.
Well,
is that what you're saying?
Okay, so I disagree with that point, and for two reasons. One, officers seem to believe that they're always on duty. Whether that's true or not, that's fine. But if we go down that road, Brennan, then we can't hold her to the standard of an officer when we say you were wrong for doing what you did. If we say you're now a civilian, then we have to treat her as a civilian, untrained.
That's not true at all.
No, you can't say. Listen, you have a training officer, and so when you're in that apartment, you should have behaved with the training you've received, and then be like, oh, you're also a civilian now. I mean, either she gets the officer tag, and so she gets credit as being an officer and the responsibility of being an officer with gun safety and how to handle herself, or she's a civilian, and that then it's done differently.
But they do
But
it all.
you can't take somebody's training. That's like saying, okay, if I'm a boxer and my hands have been certified as lethal weapons, but I'm not in the ring, say I'm just out at a festival somewhere and I get in a fight, I still have that skill. I still know the training. So it's like, you still have to hold me accountable for what I know.
As a boxer, not as a civilian. That's what I'm saying.
But it's the civilian who has been trained.
Exactly.
So let's say an officer has been off the force for the last 10 years. You know, at some point, when do you stop looking at that person as an officer and start saying this is just a regular Joe Schmo at this point? Because I've been off the force for 10 years. Yeah, I've still got the same training that I had for 20 years on the force. But now, no, we can't look at you as a regular person because 10 years ago you were still an officer of the law and you've been trained. It doesn't work that way. If you're off, it should. Why do you say that?
Because Brennan, it's training you live. If we're going to say Amber Geiger got off work and went home, and she took what she thought was her own house, and then shot this man, which she did for no fucking reason. She punished. Part of that is a heightened responsibility she had to know, one, she was in the wrong place, and two, how to behave when she got there. Right? She went into an apartment that wasn't hers. It was dark. She gave commands like an officer did. He didn't respond to the commands, and she shot him. That was her statement. So we can't, in one instance, lower her burden by saying you're off duty. So what you say to everybody else who might panic in a situation, but then say, as an officer, you knew how not to panic and how to handle yourself better.
But you're conflating two different points. You're conflating two different issues. What you're talking about, to me, seems to be how do we interpret her actions at the time versus how do we go about initially charging her and how do we go about initially treating her as a civilian. That's for the jury to decide if they're going to take into account her training and say, you know what, as an officer who's been trained, we should look at her past or her experience versus when she goes into for questioning, when she's charged, there shouldn't be any link. This is an off-duty person that committed a crime. At the time that she was an officer, treat her as an officer. When she takes off and says, you know, I've clocked out for the day, guess what? You are now on civilian time at that point. So for her actions, when you want to question what she did and how she did it, sure, you can decide if you want to treat her as an officer or not. But there should be a clear line of, because at that point, you're now saying that an officer is you are now as a civilian saying an officer is an officer no matter what goes on. And that means at any point in time, I have to make sure I don't speak to this off-duty officer a certain way because they might arrest me for acting an ass or all of a sudden say I'm impeding whatever investigation they have. I mean, you're blurring the lines.
You're actually conflating that even more so. I mean, so to answer your question again, and I'm going to say it one more time. I don't believe officers and civilians is not even a proper term. They're all officers. You're military civilian, in my opinion. I think officers, whether you are on duty and you commit a crime, whether you're off duty and you commit a crime, should be treated as everybody else when they commit a crime. There is no difference about when a crime is committed, how it should be investigated, how that person should be detained, or what have you. What I am saying is, I don't think it's right or fair to say we would treat her as a civilian in this one circumstance as an officer in this other circumstance. She's one or the other. However, in committing a crime, we should all be treated equal.
Have you been listening to Ye's album all day today? I mean, I don't understand who this new Damon is that I'm seeing.
No, I see what Damon said. I did. Like, when she went into his house, I think you have to take into account that she has training, she has skills that the average civilian doesn't have, right? And I think that's probably what gave her the courage to do what she did because she knew things that the average civilian didn't know. So I think you have to take into account that when you try this girl, when you look at this situation and you look at all, you have to take that into account. You can't just say, oh, well, she wasn't on the clock, so we're not going to treat her as an officer. That skill set, that training still walked into that apartment with her.
Exactly. And so it actually makes it harder for her to claim she didn't know what was going on, she made a mistake, because she has a higher burden. As opposed to us, we can easily make that mistake. We don't have that kind of training. We can make that mistake, and it's like, well, okay, fine. We didn't know any better. She knew better. So she can't fall on the I didn't know it was a mistake sword because she has that training.
Yeah. Well, somebody else who didn't know or pretends to didn't know what they were doing is Elon Musk, who just a few days ago was he was just he took a plea deal with the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, paid $20 million fine, and was removed as the chairman of the board for his company, the Tesla portion of his company, for saying, he went on Twitter, put out a tweet saying, "I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured," when in truth, Musk hadn't even discussed or confirmed key deal terms, including the price, with any potential funding source. They are saying that he did this knowingly and with the intent to drive up prices to get this private sale up and going, which came back to bite him in the ass. Did the SEC go too far in policing tweets, or is this something where they got it right on the money? I mean, this we're dealing with. I mean, this is moneymaker stuff. So, Thomas, as the resident moneymaker of the group, why don't you talk to us about this one?
I agree with what happened. I think we live in a different world. I mean, I think the message was the same. The method was different. You know, I mean, tweets, as silly as it may sound, is a mode of communication now, and people take it very seriously. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, I can't make a judgment whether it's too severe or not, but the consequences are something that I would anticipate happening from what he said. I mean, it was improper on many different levels, and someone that is in his capacity, like you said, I mean, can affect his stock price by saying certain things. And so I'm not surprised with the punishment. It's actually like 20 and 20, right? 20 on him and 20 on Tesla. It's like 40 total. It's crazy.
I mean, but it's a drop in the bucket for him. I mean, this is multi-billionaire. that's like what, maybe a couple of thousand for a middle class person.
Right.
For you, Damon.
For me?
Yes.
That's the moneymaker. No, I don't have couple thousand.
But sir, you've been making America great again all day. All day, son.
All day. And I'll do it again tomorrow too, son.
I bet you will.
Best believe if I wake up with a couple thousand, I'm gonna be acting real different on this show. I'll tell you that right now.
But you know who's also acting different these days? Bill Cosby. He is living a whole different lifestyle.
Man.
Bill Cosby was just sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison for sexual assault against Andrea Constant. All up and down my Facebook feed, all up and down Twitter, there's been a war of attrition for those who feel like Cosby was over-sentenced. Sexual assault victims are underheard. That as a whole, we are underappreciative of the system in which Cosby has been placed. At the end of the day, Cosby is now a convicted sexual predator. And we now have to, regardless of if you personally believe he did it or not, there is still the fact remaining that this is now a person who has been convicted of sexual assault. And he has to serve a minimum of 3 years, maximum of 10 years. That's the max you can get for this particular crime in the state. People have said that, you know, well, he's an old person, so he should be on house arrest. He's half blind, so he shouldn't really be in prison. I had to separate my feelings on the actions of Cosby for a second because I have some mixed emotions about that, and I'm not going to get into it right now. But what I feel is once a jury you've had your day in court. You matter of fact, you had a better day in court than some because you had the resources to fight at the highest levels. So once you've had your day in court, once you've been able to fight with those kind of resources, whatever time is given to you, you have to take. I mean, there's no, you're 90 years old now, so let you stay at home. Regardless of when the crime happened, you still need to atone for those crimes. And I don't see taking leniency in somebody simply because of their stature today.
Yeah.
Because you had 30, 40 years worth of freedom to do whatever the hell you wanted to do. At this point, now that it's time for you to make amends for your actions, if this was a Nazi war criminal, I wouldn't be saying, oh, you know what? Even though you killed 500 people in those gas chambers,
you're 95 years old.
Right? Let's go ahead and let you just die peaceably. No, sir.
No, so come over here.
You need to sit there and take a little bit of what you got.
Exactly.
That's just me, though.
Well, yeah, so is your question, should he not go to prison because he's old?
Well, I mean, what do you feel about that? I mean, up and down the line, you've got people on one side of the other.
You know, so the problem with the Cosby debate is it's so much. Like you walk a fine line between what you want to say and not say because you don't want to piss the wrong person off. But it's so much involved. I think everybody agrees. You know, being old and sick is not a free card. Right? But that's not the really Cosby debate here. the Bill Cosby debate is, A, did he do it, which really nobody knows but Cosby and this woman, and B, is this really symptomatic of how black people are treated in the system versus white people? And what I've seen in my feeds have been, if we got after Cosby, how come we haven't gotten Weinstein? Or how come we haven't gotten, I know we're going to get Kavanaugh later, I'm sure, Kavanaugh, or how come we haven't gotten, the other person, another person who was white, politically and rich, that also has some old ass Trump too, but you know what I'm saying? Like, Kevin Spacey. Yeah. So there's a lot. So the debates I've seen really hasn't been like, should he go to prison so much as, and is he even innocent so much? How come we're not doing this towards the white people as well? And I understand that. I understand that angst too.
Sahar, what are your thoughts on this?
It's accountability. It's accountability for the person who victimized others, and it's also understanding what got all of these people there. You know, I don't believe that necessarily as a person who's been victimized as sexual assault and I had to forgive my predator, I had to understand what brought this person there. They're not a bad person. I had to understand what happened to this person. Was there bitterment, resentment that they couldn't deal with?
It's very progressive.
It's very progressive. I have to. There's no way I'm going to end the cycle by pointing the finger at that person.
Why not?
I cannot. Yeah, I get my moment to do that and say, fuck you. That was wrong. Now for the rest of my life, I have to deal with my worth and my confidence, right? I get that. But that anger does not get me anywhere. Rather, I would rather sit with the predator, rather sit with the man, because the hurt and the healed heal. And I want to understand, like, what is it? What is it? What is it that got you there? Because it's not about the sex, it's about the power. Trust me on that. Mm-hmm. Trust me on that. So let's talk about the power. Let's talk about the power, right? Let's talk about that emotional intelligence. How else can I get you to release that so you don't have to beat me, so you don't have to rape me?
Do you think that should be your job, though? I mean, why, as the victim, do you feel it incumbent upon yourself?
It is our job.
But you're saying specifically you felt the need to go
to heal to heal myself, yes.
So this was catharsis for you?
To heal myself, yes. And I also have that bravery and that courage. Is that for every person that's been assaulted? No. Everybody has their own solution and a way to own their own voice. Right? For me, yes. Every single person here has a solution to bring for the topic that we're talking about tonight, be it assault or diversity. We all have an accountability, and you, sir, are giving us that space to have that dialogue, and I'm thankful. But we have to have it. Honest conversations move us ahead, so I gotta look at my partner and say, yo, why did you do that to me? What was really going on? I don't think you're a bad person.
So what about, since we're very specific to Bill Cosby, what about the sentiment that this was simply his time? You know, the mentality of the time. This was not a Cosby-specific predatory behavior. This was I'm in this particular industry during this particular time frame. This is what I grew up knowing what to do. We loosen them up and have a good time. Is there really something to learn from the Cosby era type person other than we no longer live in that time, so you can no longer do that?
What are the pressures he was under as a black man, as an actor in those times?
See, you're asking the wrong person, because I would see any kind of pressures on a dude who basically is the father of all black people, who is
That's not on your shoulders. I'm not excusing what he did. It is not right. I'm asking that what did that release offer him, and what made him feel that pressure to go for that kind of release?
Cosby could have had any woman on the planet at any given time, 60 years old, 30 years old. I mean, to me, that's not a matter of the pressure for him. It was if anything, it was a matter of, let me get the quick way into this rather than having to do any kind of work.
See, I do understand what she's saying, though, meaning that what is it that made you do this? Whether it be a good thing or a bad thing. It might be a terrible thing that made him do that, but I still understand what she's saying. Because anytime there's a problem, a lot of times you don't want to just address the problem, because that doesn't make the problem go away. You want to find out what the root cause of it is, so you can put a preventive action in place to prevent it from reoccurring. So I understand what she's saying, and I do agree with that. But I also do think that these people need to be held accountable to the highest standard, because that could be part of the preventive action moving forward.
Restorative justice. I love restorative justice. You put the victim and the predator in the same place, and they speak, and it's a tribal kind of thing where you have a whole community in there to vote on it. They did this in tribes growing up. I love restorative justice, and I want to bring that back, because that's the way we're going to heal.
Jason, I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that it's to answer your first question, he's got to get what he gets, right?
Yes.
There's no special treatments, and it took a little bit for me to come to that because, man, I grew up with the Cosbys, right? I mean, it's like,
You too?
I did, man.
There's so many parallels between us blacks and us Hispanics, huh?
I mean,
even though we're not eating elephant ass, there's still something to be said.
There you go. But anyways, what I was going to continue with that is, I think it also opens the eyes of men in power today. And what it does is says you cannot treat women the way you have probably learned to treat them in the industries that you're in, right?
I do agree with that 100%.
You cannot continue to do that. That mold needs to be broken, and if you don't learn it from what's going on now, shame on you 5-10 years from now, because it's probably going to be worse for you then. Because now is, so all you gentlemen out there that are listening, if you're in a position of power, now is the time to either right the wrongs or to correct your actions to make sure you respect women, treat them the way they need to be treated, and learn from this era. Because back then they didn't have to learn from it. No. Now we have to.
I just like to say, when I was in the 3rd grade,
don't do it. I have no idea where you're going. Don't do it.
When I was in 3rd grade, I just want to say I'm sorry.
I'm telling you, don't say another word.
So, you know, in Texas, there is no statute of limitations on sexual assault.
So,
I was just kidding.
The one thing I do make sure we express is that what he was charged with wasn't something that happened in the 70s or 80s. It happened in like 2000s.
Which is why I said his mentality.
But what I'm saying is, though, he should have learned. 70s, I will not forgive Bill Cosby. I'm not saying that at all. But 70s and 80s was the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. The 2000s is definitely different than the 70s and 80s. So whatever shit you did in the 70s, you should have known. And come 2000, that shit don't fly no more. Like he should have known that.
That's not true.
No, you telling me that people on Wall Street, the men in power on Wall Street in the 2000s weren't acting that way?
No, I'm not saying they weren't.
Trump came out and said it.
What I'm saying is, I don't want to compare or make say like, oh, it was part of the time. That's how it was in the 70s. Yes. But he grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and he should have adjusted to know that shit don't fly in 2000. I'm not saying it's right, but what I'm saying
is... It shouldn't fly at anything.
That shit ain't flying in. That's why he went
But what everybody's doing is saying, like, oh, that's how it was back in the 70s. And I'm saying that may be, but that's not how it is in 2000.
I hear what you're saying, but what about the idiom, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? I mean, people that are set in their ways, they continue to do those behaviors. I'm speaking specifically to what Damon is saying.
I don't believe in that, though. I think dogs learn new tricks all the time. It may take longer. It may not be as easy, but people can learn new things. And Bill Cosby is a smart man. Besides his honorary degrees everywhere, he actually has earned some degrees. He navigated a complex field from a young man to adulthood. He should have known in the 70s that shit wasn't right. He should have known in the 80s it wasn't right.
I'm sure he did, 2000.
And I don't want to say, like, I don't want to attribute anything he did to be like, oh, that wasn't how it was in the 70s. It should never happen. And especially in the 2000s. Does that make sense?
Well, I'll tell you what, he certainly has learned now. He was spitting out that knowledge on when not to sag as a young man. Now all of a sudden he knows not to go sagging there. And since he's blind, he won't see it coming. But it is what it is.
What's that?
You see, when you put your pudding in my pot, that goes the weasel.
Oh, man. Oh, to the next topic.
It is, because Kavanaugh has popped the cherry on his nomination. Speaking of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee as the next Justice of the United States of America, he had a hearing over the weekend. And this hearing was hot and spicy. He came in, tears are flowing. Well, actually, there were no tears. It was just the quiver of his voice and the lemon juice of his face to show us that he really felt something.
Which I understand.
Did you?
If I accused you, any person in this room, of sexual assault, you would defend that. You would defend that with all kinds of quiver. You would be like, you know what? I did not. No. You'd be very adamant in your denial.
Here's what I would do, because I'm up for the job of the highest court in the land. I should know how to. I do care if he did it or not. However, for a job interview, This was the worst you could show me for a job interview for your temperament.
This man is having to defend literally his honor to his family, his wife, and kids, and you were calling me a rapist. Yes, I'm going to be emotional about that. Like, I get this.
So then where are the tears, Damon? There was not a single wetness dripping from his eye.
Maybe he expressed his emotion in the way he expressed his emotion. Not everybody
as a liar.
Cry. Or,
you know, kids do. Kids will sit up there and whine and cry and say, "Oh, I'm hurt," but where are the tears? You know when something's real when you actually see a tear.
My kids cry all the time, and they are in the wrong. Like, just because you make some tears don't mean that you're telling the truth, bro.
But at least you can show a little moisture.
If that's not how you do it, that's not how you do it. He came in.
I feel like
that is a sociopath.
I feel like even without the tears, his argument, the way he defended himself was so immature. It was so laughable. Like, it was damn near exactly like the SNL skit. I was like, this dude, are you serious? Like, this is your argument based on the accusations that you're facing. This is what you're coming up and saying. I like beer. And I'm like, man, you, like Brennan said, you running for Supreme Court justice. You have had to go through so much training, education. What he's like, Yale law or something?
Yeah, he kept throwing out Yale.
Yeah, he kept throwing. I'm like, dude, are you serious? This is your defense against what you're being accused of doing.
How do you defend a negative, though? How do I go back and say I did not do this from 1983?
You know how you defend it? You know how you defend it? You start off by saying, when they ask you a very direct question of, will you allow us to do an FBI investigation? You know what? I'm so confident in what you won't find out about me. Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, it happened 30 years ago, so I don't even think you can find out anything about me. Sure, go ahead. He navigated away from that question so many. Feinstein asked him so many times directly, will you allow us, will you go off and condone an FBI investigation? I don't think I should have to.
That's right.
Sir, that's not the question being asked of you. Yes or no?
Correct,
what are you talking about? No, that's bullshit. If this man is sitting here free,
if you know Brennan as a black man and a defense attorney, if a cop says, "Hey, Brennan, can I investigate you for some shit?" You're gonna be like, "Yeah, I ain't done wrong, so go right ahead." That's bullshit.
Except I'm up for a job. Like, if you were to say, "Hey, Brennan, I want to give you $1 million, but I got to go back here and investigate everything about you," by all means, sir, please go ahead and do it, because I know that there's not going to be anything that you're going to find on me in that regard. Not only that, but the shit that he didn't have to lie about, he still was shady about. He was shady about him not having any connections to get into Yale. You're a fucking legacy. You had questions about you being how far you took your drinking habits. It's okay for you. You could have said easily, you know what? Back in college and back in high school, I was a drinker, man. I loved a little libation. But now that I'm an adult, I've learned to temper myself. Now that I'm a judge, I do things a little bit differently. He didn't have to do anything to fake his way and make himself look like this angel back in college. But everything about him as he went on, he had to try to paint himself as this angelic presence. It's okay to be who you were back then. You don't have to say, and then you got this fucking who has a calendar from 30 years ago? All of a sudden, you know what? I'm glad you asked about 1981, because at 3:42 I was poo-pooing in the bathroom. Get out of here. And then you still kept it? Get out of here, man.
So that may be true. That's definitely creepy, but you can't say what you would do in a situation you're not going to be in ever in your life.
Because everybody going to be saying that.
All I know is the man. I'm not considering Judge Tisch's response to the questions. Did he cry or not cry? There's nothing he would have said that you would have liked. Not a damn thing he would have said.
Yes, there is. You
didn't like him from the start, so everything he did, you were like, fuck,
it's not true at all. When he first came out here looking indignant white man, I just want to say, he's going to come out there with
the man walked out and said nothing, you already thought he was indignant.
But you know what? When Hillary Clinton walked in there when she was being persecuted, it has nothing to do with being like, if this dude had come in looking like Don Juan said, hey, shit happens, I would be like, right on, brother. Shit does happen.
A single word you judged him. He walked in, he's already indignant to your eyes.
But that's what we do as people. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Sahar.
They both had time to prepare. They both had time to prepare. Okay? And she chose to come in there, and she held her cool. Her voice shook. But it's okay for him to raise his voice and be mad. They're both under the gun. They both had time to prepare. She didn't want to be out there in public, but she owned her voice. She owned that story.
No, it's talking about Ford.
Yeah. So
look, you can't even remember the woman's name. How dare you, Damon? How dare you?
No, but I'm talking about Kavanaugh and Ford. So he had time to prepare too. You know, one of the things when you have to speak and you need to hold your emotions and squeeze your butt. She was squeezing her ass to keep her voice from shaking because it's hard for us.
Is this a
secret, trade secret?
Is this a Muslim Middle East? I'm sorry, Middle Eastern.
I am not Muslim.
Middle East. Middle East.
Right, sir.
You're right. You're right.
No, this is owning your voice as a human, so you could be an effective communicator. So that when I'm a woman, if my voice shakes, they're gonna be like, "Oh, she's getting emotional. Be careful."
Right.
Or if I raise my voice, "Oh, that crazy bitch, hold her back."
Right.
But if a man is doing that, give him his space to feel his emotions. Nah. They both had time
She
to
rose a
prepare.
parachute. Nah.
They both had time to prepare.
Almost
They
squeezed
both
my
had
butt
time to bring
cheeks.
his
I'm gonna close
capabilities.
an
He's
argument.
acting out of his emotions. And as a judge, that is not
that's
okay.
the right
You know what he looked like? He looked like that kid going to take his final who ain't cracked the fucking book all semester. That's how he responded.
Nervous.
He responded like he didn't know
Fearful.
shit. He didn't know how to answer the questions or nothing. I'm like,
Same standards.
come on, man. This is ridiculous.
So I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't know what to say about the emotional side of it. I agree that there should not be a difference in how men and women are treated in their emotional response, and I think it's okay to have an emotional response. So as a woman testify, if you have an emotional response, no matter what it may be, and me personally, I'll be like, oh, she's just being a woman. You know, I don't think that's fair. I also don't think it's fair to say Kavanaugh had an emotional response, so therefore, I mean, he's accused of being. We're basically accusing him of sexual assault, and for every man in this room, that's something we're strongly opposed to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be known as a rapist, and I don't want people to call me that, and I don't want my kids to ask me, "Daddy, what's a rapist?" I don't want that. And so if you bring that to me, I'm going to be visceral. I'm going to be emotional.
Well, you should have been out there raping everybody in the streets if that's.
I'm saying I can understand an emotional response. You call you a murderer, who gives a shit? I didn't murder nobody, who cares? But a rapist, I mean, that's powerful. That's very negative. Especially
if somebody calls you a rapist and you actually are not a rapist, I think you will be able to navigate through those questions much better than what he did.
Yeah,
you'll be able to respond and navigate through it easier. Because I agree with Brennan. If you really are innocent of these things, why not? Agree to do some of the things that they were saying? Would you
FBI
agree
check?
to?
Quentin, you want to do that shit right now?
You already have FBI checks going on. What's the difference between one more?
Background
You've had
checks and
6.
a criminal or investigation aren't the same thing, sir. Yeah, run my credits, make sure I got no criminal history. I don't care about that. But go interview everybody and say, did he rape you? I mean, come on now.
If he's an innocent man, then he should be confident in the fact that every single woman that you can bow your head in disgust or whatever else. But as a somebody who's innocent, I can guarantee you, if you were to say, Brennan, I think you may have raped somebody. Please go ask every single woman that I've been around, and you can have that. Go ask them twice, because I'm that confident that none of them would have told you, oh, yeah, I think. Are you talking about rapey Brennan? Yeah. No, they're not going to do that. And he should be so confident in himself as a Supreme Court nominee to be able to tell everybody, go ask these people. You've already asked them 6 times. Go ask them a 7th time just to be sure.
You're so full of shit.
But now all of a sudden he's got the. But you know what happened now? Senator Flake had to turn around because he had somebody yell at him saying this is a disgrace as an American citizen. They went back, and now the president, with all the heat that he's catching, I'm surprised. I didn't think he even felt heat. But with all the heat that he's catching with the White House, the Senate has decided to hold off for at least a week for the FBI to investigate any and all allegations, or to the breadth of whatever they feel is necessary to have a conclusory decision come out for their investigation. Sad part is, I think that at the end of the day, even if they say there's some questionable things, the Republicans are going to say, you know what, Lindsey Graham and them are still going to say, you know what, he's still a man of God who has changed his stripes, and let's go ahead. And quite honestly, I think that a lot of these Republican senators are so against it, not just because they're on the other side of the aisle, but because some of their actions are reflective of their behavior back in the day, and they're saying, you know what if this was me? I don't want to be morally hypocritical in my own mind and persecute somebody for some shit that I probably did back in my day. So you know what? We understand where you're coming from. It was just partying back then. It's a different time. Now look at you. You're a beautiful man now. Away with the bullshit.
So on that point, I agree with you, but for a different reason. They don't care about being hypocrites. They always are. I think it's just setting the standard. Like just saying, you can have all this shit, we can kind of believe it, and we will still get our way.
Well,
and that would encourage people to not come forward. Like, it doesn't matter. If the man still gets put on the bench, then all this is for naught.
So, the issue that we have with these type of conversations is that each of our thoughts about it stem from our background. They stem from how we were raised. They stem from what we were taught. They stem from how people interacted with us. And as minorities, you would think that we would kind of have the same type of background, the same type of viewpoints on this, but it doesn't seem to always be the case. Sure. Speaking of which, going back to you, Thomas, in your thoughts on, the privilege of being a citizen, the privilege of saying the Pledge of Allegiance, there seems to be a divisiveness between minorities within the United States. And I think part of it has to deal with because different minorities are treated differently by the majority. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, I understand that it exists, but I mean, one thing that a lot of people don't understand about Asians is we're as much of a victim as being the model minority as any other minority out there. I think we've been abused by other, nationalities or races for their own agenda because, there's no benefit to being the model minority. It's not even true, actually, if you go into the facts, right? That was used by one group to show that, hey, look at these minorities. Look, they did the right thing. They don't cause any problems. They're all wonderful. Why can't you be like them? And it's not to our advantage. It's to our disadvantage. And I think for us, I feel growing up, I know we had it, I'm not going to say harder than anybody else, but we had a different set of challenges, right? Because, I'll tell you guys this, whether you agree with it or not, African American, Mexican American, Caucasian, when people look at you guys, it's easy to see that and appreciate, hey, you're an American, right? For me, it's hard. Whether you love me or I'm born here or I don't have an accent or whatever, it's hard for people to look at me and say, oh, that guy's an American, right? Because the gut reaction is,
He's from China.
He's from China, right?
I was guilty of that.
but you are also the most small-minded person here.
but I'm glad that I live in Houston. I think we're the best city in the world.
I think that helps.
Yes. But absolutely. But if I lived in Idaho, and not even Idaho. If I lived in Kentucky, let's go to Florida.
I'm glad you said that.
Maybe West Texas.
I'm glad you said that because America, most places are black and white until you get to a larger city to where these huge melting pots. And where I came from, it was black and white. It was probably I could probably count on one hand how many Asians I went to school with. I could count on two hands how many Hispanics I went to school with. And until you come into a city like this and you start to
But sir, y'all just found out that y'all were free in South Carolina. So
you look like you just learned you were free.
I know you guys looking like somebody just called the doorbell for you.
I'm glad he said that because I was very ignorant to that. Coming from South Carolina, coming from a smaller town, and not being exposed to different cultures and understanding that Americans look like the world. It doesn't matter how you look. Were you born here? Where you were raised, right? So,
but the sad thing is, obviously there's half the country that doesn't think that way anymore. Do
you think that part of the issue is assimilation? And when I talk about assimilation, I talk about minority assimilation in terms of as a minority subculture comes into the United States, some try their best to keep their preceding culture as much as possible, even though they're in this new, more melting pot culture of America. I mean, America's supposed to be a culture of diversity and melting pot. We assimilate everything in. But for instance, I say the Asian culture. You're South Korean, right?
Vietnamese.
I'm sorry, Vietnam. I knew that.
I like South Korean.
Shut up. I knew that, but I apologize. You're Vietnamese, and in Vietnamese culture, within the Asian culture, we seem to think that Asians are almost set apart from the rest of us. They do everything themselves. They have their own businesses, and they're very much when businesses arise within the Asian communities, they are run by the Asians. All the people in the back of the Asians, everybody in there, Asian money stays within the Asian culture. versus black money spreads itself out. It doesn't really stay with us very long. Our dollar stays with us, I think, for the first minute, and then it goes out to the rest of the American population. So when you're talking about you feeling like you are an outsider, is some of that kind of self-imposed because you do such a good job of insulating yourself from the rest of the group?
We're half responsible. I mean, it's 2018. I'm still talking about it every chance I get. I mean, Asian people don't vote.
Really?
And we don't. I mean, that's a big problem. It's a massive problem. We have no voice because we're fragmented, right? You know, Koreans, Vietnamese, Japanese, and then a lot of us don't vote because they don't feel like it's useful.
It's going to make an impact.
And then when we give back, usually we only give back to our own culture, and so that kind of like feeds that whole perception that you just care about your own community. You don't care about being an American or being in America, right? And some of the stereotypes that you talk about, they're not self-imposed from a position of like elitist. Mm-hmm. It is, my parents. Like, think about it. My parents, I can only imagine going through what they went through, right? My dad was 33 in 1976, right? So all of a sudden, because of this war, my parents were transported to another country, didn't have nothing, didn't even know the language, didn't even look like nobody, right? Luckily, we had a sponsor that helped them, right? But every Asian had the same problem. You don't speak their language. You have a strong accent. You don't know anyone, and nobody wants to get to know you either. I mean, so what do? The only thing you can do is most of the time open up your own business, do the type of jobs that don't require you to talk to somebody else. And so if you think about all the stuff that most Asian cultures do, nail shops, convenience stores, they are things that are more merchant related, as opposed to like, interactions. Sure. It doesn't require you to talk. You don't have to speak English to sell a pack of cigarettes. Yeah. You don't have to speak English.
They will curse you out in their own language in that shop, though. You don't even know what they're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going.
No.
I want to put like a different spin on it because we're talking about assimilation. So I grew up in a military family. I was born in Texas, and then from being born in Texas, my dad being a fighter pilot in the Air Force, most of his career we were overseas. So I lived in the Philippines, I lived in Guam. My dad would do tours in South Korea when they do training. So living in the Philippines and living in Guam, the assimilation is difficult because they see you as an American, right? They see me, they're like, oh, he's an American. We don't like him automatically. And it's tough, right? Because this whole talk about assimilation, like if I didn't jump in and try to learn some of the cultural values, the acceptance wouldn't be there, right? They wouldn't accept me because even though those two areas, the Philippines not being a territory anymore, but Guam being a territory, it's like we're Chamorro first. Like that's the native islanders. And we're Chamorros first, and then, everything else comes second. So when you come to our island, we expect you to at least be respectful to our customs, right? And if you don't do that, then get off our island, right? And so a lot of the problems I had, especially growing up in Guam, was like, I'm trying to hold on to my Mexican-American values and how we feel and how we do things. And sometimes they're similar, especially when it comes to Catholicism and religion, because it's a big Catholic island. But in other ways, they're not, right? And as a young man, you're fighting that battle, trying to be taken in by your adolescent peers. But at the same time, you feel like, man, I'm kind of selling myself out on this end, and I don't want to give that up. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I can see when folks come over here, they're like, why go assimilate? I'm going to stick with my culture because that's easiest, and we can help our community out, and we'll do it. And then when I become established, then I'm just going to get back to what gave to me.
But why does it feel like, minorities are minorities in this country, meaning that whichever one it is, we are still numbers-wise less than the white American population, which means that individually no minority holds any kind of power unless we go through and collectively come together. Why are we so divisive within the minority culture to say, you got the Middle Easterners over here, you got the Muslims over there, the Asian community over there, and quite honestly, it's almost, I feel like there's not much respect between minority cultures to say, you know what, where the bridges being crossed on each of these sides. Why do you think that there's such a demarcation line between each of those minority groups, Sahar?
Well, speaking to our parents, where they were in survival mode. So you come in and you're working and you got to survive, and what's the easiest? How am I going to feed my family? It was the same for me. My mom came, she had 2 kids, $5. That's it. Didn't know the language, so she had to put herself through nursing school and learn at the same time. So you go into your comfort zone. But now, us, I'm not first generation. I was born in Iran, but it's up to us to be that bridge, to start these conversations and say, okay, let's get out of our comfort zones. We're not in survival mode anymore. And let's break bread with other folks. Let's start these conversations. And it is about that dialogue. It really is. But it starts from that survival mode. When you get here, you're head down, work. What's the easiest way to feed my family and to stay alive? But that continues. And it's up to us, the next generation, to say, okay, we're good. Now we got restaurants like Peli Peli. Let's go break bread together. Come on, me and you, me and you.
And it seems like, after having talked to a lot of African Americans, it seems like African Americans feel a little bit jaded when it comes to when and how other minority groups speak out about certain civil issues or civic issues. It seems that black people tend to be at the forefront of civil rights issues, and then when it's convenient for others, they kind of jump on the bandwagon. Speaking of maybe like the Asian American culture, where all of a sudden, they started, there's lawsuits being had about their inclusiveness on the collegiate level, saying that they're being
getting into Harvard,
right? Getting stereotyped because of their Asianness, and then citing as authority some of the affirmative action issues that black people fought so hard for on that front. And then with Hispanics, to me, have always been it's black then Hispanics in terms of who the police are going to go after. They're going to come out after the blacks, and then as soon as they get through handcuffing us, oh, you there, Mexican, come over here. You there, Guatemalan, come over here. But yet and still, Hispanics seem to have a visceral reaction towards black people. I mean, it's almost, I would venture to say that I see the same type of racism, at least in terms of hateful prejudice from Hispanics towards blacks, that I see from whites towards blacks. And I don't understand why, if we're in the same boat of prejudicial misconduct by the majority, why wouldn't we be on the same side of stuff? Why wouldn't we be like, oh, that's my brown brother right there? I just don't get it.
I think it's a trust thing, right? I mean, and it comes to, you got to break down the barriers to get into that trust. I think some of the most remarkable times in our country come through when we are forced to trust each other. 9/11.
Harvey, yeah.
Harvey.
Yeah.
Any type of weathering storms or any type of significant event that forces people to break down that barrier. And I go back to the military again, because we're forced, like when I was in elementary school, like I'm thinking back, I didn't realize the diversity that I was in. I just thought that that's the way it was. I mean, I didn't go to school in the United States until I was in high school. So from elementary school up to high school, I just thought everybody was cool with each other. And it wasn't until I went to high school in a suburb outside of D.C. that I realized, shit, like, damn,
brother, they play.
Yeah, like I better keep it real, stick to my own, and if we're cool because we're on the same team together, we're cool while we're on the team, and we become family when they invite me over to their homes to break bread with them, with their family, and their moms and their uncles and everybody else treat you like their family. But before that happens, you don't get there. You stay with your friends, your little group, and me growing up the way I did, I mean, I tried to be a social butterfly, have friends with everybody, but at the same time, when I moved there, it was a big eye opener for me to be like, okay, I see the Asian students always with the Asian students, and the black students with the black students, and in that point in time, it wasn't a big Latin population, and where I went to high school, so I was kind of like searching for, like, well, at that point in time, I was just like, man, I don't even know what to do, like, because they're not from Mexico, they're from El Salvador, and I'm like, I don't know anybody from El Salvador. I don't even, our cultures are different, so where the hell do I go? But
you could have come with us, brother. We accept anybody who wants to be around.
But look, but you know, I didn't learn that growing up.
Black people always tend to be the ones like, look, if y'all like us, we love you. We're always at, no matter, and it's frustrating because no matter what the minority is, we're always at the bottom rung. If you looking at somebody who appears to look like a terrorist, and then you look at the black person, you're gonna say, "Can you hold my purse, terrorist?" I mean, that's just the way it is for us. No matter what, we are always at the bottom, but doing all of the fighting. And then at the end of the day, once the fight has been fought, oh man, I'm glad y'all got that for us. Now we can all feed and feast off of this. It's just frustrating.
Yeah. I've often felt like there's always like a success scale in this country of white and black. And the more you appear to be white, the more success. So as long as people aren't being compared to being black, they're okay with it, right? And like, I always feel like black people are always marginalized or discriminated to be like the what not to be, right? Mm-hmm. Don't treat me like a black person. Don't do this like a black person. Don't be ghetto like a black person. Don't do this like a black person. And then it is what it is. And if the closer you get to like a white person, then you've made it. And, you know, obviously black is the complete opposite of white.
Let me ask you all this question. So do you think it's because you guys have, blacks have had such a foothold in our history in this country to do things first, right? That most Mexican Americans are migrant workers. My grandparents were migrant workers. So they were taught, hey, we don't got time to mess around and march down the street and stand up for what's right. You get up with the kids, take them to the fields. And, I mean, I had two uncles that were born in the fields, right? So that was the culture, that was the life. Now that we're older, my sister and my cousins and other folks, now it's time where you take the time to do the things that you're supposed to be doing. Coming to these shows, doing this and educating. Hopefully some young lady or young man is listening. It's like, oh man, I feel that, right? But I think a lot of it, the reason you guys are saying, well, we ride on our coattails is because y'all were the first ones to do it, and there's no shame in that, and that's a great thing.
See, to me, it's a little more than that. True, it's not just the first ones, but like we had to. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we had no choice. It was
we weren't here.
Well, but that's not true, though.
That's not true at all. That's not true. Asians were here right with us. Hispanics were here right with us.
Texas, Hispanics were here before white people were.
You got to remember,
this is their country.
Yeah, but y'all took it from us. Everybody took it from us.
Y'all put it right.
Everybody took it from us.
We were still working the land no matter who owned it. I mean, truth be told.
It always, when I think of, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know the entirety of the civil rights struggle. Yeah. But when I look back on the history of civil rights, I always see blacks and then some whites joining in to help, and you almost never see an Asian person or a Hispanic person like walking with you.
I'm glad you own your truth, Thomas.
Walking with them. And it's frustrating because you see like 100 years of a slow progression of rights, of movements, of this and that, and it always felt like blacks. And every time something was achieved, then everybody's like, "Hey, yeah, we got this." But then, and you celebrate it, but then you don't walk with this, you don't fight with this, and as long as you're treated as a black person, when it comes time to that, then you're okay. That's always how I've always felt growing up. So I'm not saying it's true, that's how I've always felt.
To answer your question, I think I look at us as kind of like the big brother of minority relations, meaning in the household, the oldest always had to get the punishment. The oldest always had to wear down the parent. So by the time little brother and little sister got there, parents are just tired. I'm like, all right, you know what I'm saying? You've won this battle. You know, I've already gone through it with the oldest one. So now you get to reap the benefits of what Big Brother got to do. The Asian American population has always, like I said, they've always been here, but they've been so small, they were never seen as a threat. Okay, when they came over here of their own volition originally in terms of merchandising. You know, they were here building companies or for the purpose of being merchants in America. So there was always China and all the other Asian countries banding underneath China had this view of, well, if a Chinaman, and I'm not saying that in a slurred term, but back in the day, if a Chinaman came over here, it was to conduct business. So they're bringing us money, so we don't have to focus on them. Hispanics, well, the ones here now, they're always tilling the land. They're working for the lower price. We've already got our slaves. We can't really keep our slaves, so we've got this other cheap labor now that we can pay, and we don't have to treat them with the same respect that we would do anybody else, but they're a necessary evil for us. But we still got this monkey on our back of these black people who keep crying and whining about what was done to them. Can y'all just shut the fuck up while we use our new source of labor source and treat them in a way that we want to without giving them everything, but we know that they're going to take what little we give them without really arguing about it. Because black people have been fighting for so long, we know what we're missing out on. Hispanics are trying to move up in the world into coming into the U.S., so we can treat them a little bit differently and not get so much flack from them. Middle Easterners kind of fall in that territory of the Asian population in terms of a smaller minority. And the only problem that we really have with them is that we consider them to be all Muslims, or we consider them to be all terrorists. So if we can keep them to a minimum, then we're good. There's only, the Muslim population only makes up about 2% of America. The Asian population makes up about 5 to 6% of America. African Americans make up about 13%, and then you've got the Hispanic culture that makes up about 16 to 18% of America. And over the next 20 years, it will be Hispanics increasing theirs, blacks actually staying at the same level, and every other kind of increasing their share, profit share in America. So for us, even though we're still not the largest minority population, the Hispanics are, we're still the ones who speak out the loudest. Therefore, we are the threat, and we get most of the flack, which means that Asian Americans are free to be conservatives. Hispanic Americans are free to be conservatives. They can think about things that we don't get to think about because we're always on the defense. Whereas the Asian Americans can say, hey, you know what? I don't really like these fiscal policies. Let me go be a Republican. Or the Hispanic Americans, for whatever. I don't even know why Hispanics are Republicans. Quite honestly, like, to me, that's about the dumbest thing in the world that you could do. But y'all get the luxury of doing that. Where we don't have the luxury of being able to relax and just live in our Americanism. Sahar?
It was a lot.
It was. I apologize.
Was that a question? Or?
No, it was an answer.
I get that. I get what it's like to wake up and have to think about your gender or your race, how you have to present yourself in public, where the challenges ahead of you is what's on your forefront. I get that. But I don't see it as freedom. I see it as every single person's responsibility now. Going back to what I talked about our generation being the one that opens that dialogue. It's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to look at that someone that is different from us and champion that person. I know this opens certain doors. So I'm going to open that door. And
you're pointing at something. I want to be
at my skin.
Okay,
because
it was in the breasticle area, and I didn't know what you were talking about.
Be on the Me Too
you know, like, I don't want y'all saying. Remember that time Brendan raped Sahar?
Now we wouldn't go back to this.
First, Me Too should include men as well.
Agreed.
Please. And it's my responsibility to know certain doors will open because of my skin color, and I need to champion the opposition once I get into that door. That's what I see as my responsibility and how I'm going to create change.
So how do you see us bridging the gaps that we should be bridging as minorities?
Having conversations like this that are uncomfortable and make your hands sweat, that make you feel like you're in this debate. Asking those questions and being curious, passing you some literature that I might be interested in for you to learn, and then for us to find some similar ground. Maybe that's a plate at Peli Peli or right here on the mic with you. But it is for championing your voice and saying, you're right. You were on the forefront. I see what you're carrying, and I'm going to stand right next to you.
Well, we appreciate that. Thomas, do you think that there is... aside from the minority divide in terms of cultural living, do you see there being a prejudice amongst the different groups?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that always infuriates me is the hate that each minority has for another. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, the hypocrisy. You know, I remember Steve Harvey. I don't know if you guys remember.
We know who Steve is. Yeah. We're familiar with him.
We almost kicked him out.
You know, a couple of years ago, he made a joke about, Asian American men and, how their sexuality, right? And, you see on Facebook all these jokes, and then you see people trying, no, it's not all blacks. But, to me, when I see, African American or another minority just kind of ching chong, blah, 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 I'm like, man, you've walked in my shoes, though. You know, like how can you? Maybe it's unfair to say that, but that's how I always look at it. I'm like, dude, like the other day you just got mad at someone on Facebook because of the oppression that you feel, but then yet I saw your Facebook comment about that, and it was so easy for you to like chime in about Asians. I mean, sometimes like they're opening Katy Asia Town out in Katy, and I mean sometimes it's hard for me to read the comments because I know some motherfucker is gonna like say something, and it's hurtful because it's 2018, and it goes back to the fact that like every minority has its own prison. Yeah. Right? For me, I'm sharing with you guys part of our prison, being Asian Americans, is we're almost invisible here. Because it's hard to be accepted as an American, right? I mean, even Chloe Kim, when she won the gold medal as an American, you saw a lot of hate because a lot of people.
Who was it?
She was she's South Korean, but she's an American. She got a gold medal for snowboarding.
You're so uninformed. You're so uninformed.
17 or something like that.
Right.
She won a gold medal.
She want to go better for the U.S. I mean, she's born here.
Yeah, okay.
But everything about her is American.
Yeah.
But yet, there was a lot of people in this country that just could not accept that she's American. Oh, she's Asian though. Well, no, she's American. Like she was born here. Everything about her, except for the color of her skin. But that's, to me, I'm like, and then this is part of our fault too. But I feel like Asian Americans don't have a voice in this country. And that's half our fault. We have to accept that because we don't,
vote.
We don't vote, and we always say, how come there aren't any Asian American leaders? Well, because we never speak up for others. And if we do speak up, it's only for other Asians. And then why do we cry out whenever people don't, shout out for us, right? And then, because we don't vote, because we don't participate, I feel like we're the only minority, if you guys realize this, we're the only minority where it's almost okay to say racist jokes in 2018 in a public forum, right? You see it at the Oscars, you see it at award shows. No one would say a joke about an African American, Mexican American in that way. You say it about an Asian, any kind of stereotype, everyone laughs. Oh, it's just jokes. That's why I'm like, man, that sucks, right? And I don't know when that would change. So every minority kind of has its own little thing to deal with, because for me, I don't know anything but America. Obviously, you can tell I feel still privileged to have this opportunity to live here. I love this country. I love this city. And it's hurtful that there's always going to be people in this country that no matter how many Pelis I open, they're always going to be like, is that a Chinese restaurant? Yeah. Like just because, they look at the color of my skin, they're like, that guy's...
Well, I think one thing to answer your question about the hypocrisy. One, I want to start off by saying I think you're absolutely right that there is hypocrisy, and not just within
it goes
black
both ways too.
I'm saying this is across all minority boards. I can only speak to the African American culture subculture by saying that I think for us it's a matter of us feeling like things are unfair for us in terms of the Asian culture seems to be thriving financially. Even though you're a small subgroup, you seem to be very well populated in terms of fiscal status. So for us, it's like, well, yeah, y'all don't struggle. You don't struggle the way we struggle, or saying something like that. So of course we're gonna laugh at you, and we laugh at each other. We're hypocritical with our own people, and we talk about Africans. We talk with the African booty scratchers. Like black people have always just been one thing we've always done is make jokes as a way of laugh at my pain. The way Kevin Hart titled one of his comedy projects. That's what we do. We crack jokes about everything, and we're sensitive when it's directed at us if it's not one of our own. And I think that it is hypocritical in terms of how we speak to each other, but I think it also has something to deal with the fact that we feel that no matter what, we're still at the bottom rung of the societal totem pole. Another issue I think that we have is the fact that we classify ourselves by ethnicity instead of calling ourselves American. It's an Asian American. It's a African American. It's a Middle Eastern American. So it's hard for us to be cohesive and build those bridges that you were talking about, Sahar, because we divide ourselves up by those subcultural monikers. And I think that if we were to start looking at ourselves and saying, oh, that's another American versus tagging them, we wouldn't assume that when Thomas opens up a Pele Pele, it should be a Vietnamese restaurant. Because in your mind you're thinking, well, what is a Vietnamese person doing opening up a South African? He doesn't know anything about South Africa, not knowing that you could have studied in South Africa for culinary school. You could have simply loved, we put ourselves in these boxes, and then societally we expect each other to do what we have those boxes designated for us.
To be absolutely fair, though, if you open up like a Vietnamese joint, I would question the authenticity of that as well. I mean, I get
because you're a hater. So you're a hater, and you want to make America great.
That particular thing right there may not be racism so much as like you just wouldn't expect.
So you wouldn't eat Daddy Green's pizza?
I wouldn't eat anything he made, especially if you put Daddy in front of it. So no.
I'm talking about from The Last Dragon, man. You wouldn't eat Daddy Green's pizza.
He's never seen The Last Dragon.
Fuck you,
I will say
this man know what I'm talking about. You gotta do yourself, David.
Fuck you was showing up, all right?
Jason, you're the master. Go ahead.
So anyways, I was thinking about my community, my culture, and as I think about it from the perspective of my grandparents and the older generation. I think, without doing more research, and this is just off the top of my head, but what I see and what I feel is that they came into this country to work hard, and they would take any job in any service industry that they could do, whether it's as migrant workers or home builders or road pavers or whatever it is. They would get a job, and that's what they did. So my parents' generation, they were the first ones to go and actually finish college, or finish high school and actually contemplate college. Not everybody went, but those that did, they were in positions where they could make a difference. And I think now it's incumbent upon my sister and our generation, to take it to the next level and jump into those positions within our communities, to have that voice and to take it as far as we can. Because, I mean, although the Mexican American or the Latino was probably here in this southwestern California down to Texas region first, you have to admit that a lot of it was taken away from like the Native American, because a Native American was forced to federal lands and to do that. And where are our Native American leaders? And when you suppress a voice like that, it takes time. I mean, we're on this earth for so long, but while you're here, you have to take that time to pass that voice on.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it right, it's not going to happen. And I think just because our culture is work hard, keep your head down, you'll make it one day, and then be educated, I think our culture needs to have a shift, and I think it is. It's like with Julian Castro in San Antonio, the Castro brothers. It's starting to happen. It's just not on a grander scale as where blacks or African Americans have taken that with Martin Luther King and very prominent civil rights leaders in our country. So I think we'll get there.
I think exactly what you're saying is right. But I think one thing we have to remember here is that, and I respect all minorities, man. Like when I first moved here, I would just see a instant connection with Hispanics, with the Asians. Like when I go to work and go into the office, talking to them about different, hip hop artists or music or different foods and stuff. It was just a automatic connection. But one thing I want people to understand is that you're right. When we came here, it was the Native Americans here that were doing everything, and then of course, what happened to them happened. And then the blacks came over as slaves. And before the Hispanics came, we were the ones who were paving roads, building the houses, the welders, the blacksmiths, and the farmers, and all that. And then what happened is civil rights came, right? And it was like, slavery ended, then civil rights was like, we need to be compensated for this, right? And then not only do we need to be compensated, but we need to be compensated fairly for this. Mm-hmm. And then I think what happened is, like he mentioned earlier, then the white people, they got slighted. It was like, we don't want to pay them a fair wage to do this. We don't want to treat them the same as we treat them. So we're going to look for a cheaper labor to come in. And like I said, I don't knock any minority for coming in and looking for opportunity. You get opportunity however you can. If it's cleaning schools or whatever you got to do, you do it. And I think sometimes the misconception out there is that black people think they're too good for these jobs, so they don't want them. But one thing we have to remember is that a lot of those opportunities were taken away from us, and we didn't have the opportunity to continue to do those things. And I think it just creates a wall between blacks and Hispanics, because sometimes it seems like they think we look down on them for doing those certain jobs. And a lot of times it's that, no, we used to do those jobs. We used to do those jobs, and then we demanded to be paid fairly and equally for the jobs. And, you know, white people, they just found another way. And like I said, not knocking any of the minorities, but I think that's something that we forget, and we kind of skip over sometimes in history, is that all of us have really been dealt the same cards, just at different levels, and we play those opportunities to our advantages, right? So, but yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, though.
Well, appreciate that last word, Mr. Broadwater. So we're going to end up wrapping this up, but we got a little bit of black magic we do every single week that we want to shout out to.
Can we do some multicultural magic this week?
Well, now you're making this awkward for me. But we have one that Sahar talked about, which is, I want to say her name right, Nivea Spillman, who is a 13-year-old football player over in North Kansas City, Missouri. She is a football player playing for the Naples Park football team. She's actually the quarterback for the team. So hats off to you, young lady, for being black magic, going out there, doing what the boys do, and saying that you are not afraid to be a strong, independent woman that don't take no mess from no man. We also want to take a shout out to one Mr. Tiger Woods for his 80th PGA Tour win at the Tour Championship. Good to see Tiger.
He's multicultural.
There's your multicultural.
He's what, Cablasian? Cablasian. So he takes all of us here.
There we go. Right on time.
You know, we once thought that, or we being the media, thought that Mr. Woods was no longer with us in this PGA world.
Well, we have claimed him back.
He has Lazarus himself back into our hearts, and we want to say congratulations to you, sir, for winning your 80. That 80 is a lot, man.
Yeah, I mean, he got a long future ahead.
Yeah.
Would you consider him a better winner than what's her name, Serena?
I would
What
say
do you better
equal.
winner?
Like you say, the all-time winners. Would you think of her as the all-time winner or him?
I mean, he has more, right?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the game he plays, he's going to accumulate more.
Well,
but
this is his day, so we're going to give it to him.
I would say Serena's better, though.
But lady and gentlemen, want to say thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you.
Sahar, if they have more questions for you, want to reach out to you, where can they reach you?
At Sahar Paz on all the social channels. Join me October 19th for Own Your Voice Summit, so you can scale your voice to reach social impact.
All right, well, we'll make sure to put that on the website and on our Facebook page, so people can go look it up if they choose to. And I'm excited for you about the great things that you're doing within the community.
Thank you for having me.
Jason,
Yes,
I
sir.
know that you can't really put your because you work in the private sector of criminal defense. We can't really put you out there, but is there anything that you want to say in terms of if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm pretty active on Twitter. It's at JD.Sosa. Hit me up. I mean, I love reaching out to people. I love mentoring, and I just love the conversation I have with my community. That's one of the things that I've proclaimed that's going to happen by 2020 is that my community will see more of me out there walking streets, getting to know more business people, and hopefully making a difference in Harris County.
Speaking into existence.
And Thomas, I'm going to speak those things as though they were. So I'm speaking that you're going to offer me a chef's table at your restaurant. But I want people to know that Pele Pele is one of the best restaurants. And I'm not saying that just because you're here. But, we'll talk about that later. You don't ask that kind of questions to the man right here.
That's the man right here.
So,
I want to go.
but Thomas, go ahead and tell us about your restaurant, where they can find you, where it's located for Damon.
All right, Pele Pele, I like to think of us as the people's restaurant. We are the most multicultural restaurant in Houston. I believe that. We represent every flavor of the world. That's what South African is about. It's about diversity of people and cultures. We have 3 fine dining locations, Galleria, Cinco Ranch, Vintage Park, 2 fast casual, one on Spring Branch, one in the new Whole Foods in the Heights. But you can follow me on Instagram, South African Asian.
Okay. I like confusion.
But any other Asians out there that are listening, I mean, I want to encourage us to get involved more in the community that we live in.
Yeah.
We need to speak out more for people, not just for Asians, but people that are not Asian, right? There's a
Help
reason
the brothers out.
we need to, I want like Jason was talking about, our generation needs to change things a bit. We don't have the same struggles that my parents have, right? We actually have a lot of privileges, and so we need to use those resources and use those opportunities to give back, pay it forward, and kind of change the game a little bit.
All right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've enjoyed the show. It's time for us to let you guys go, but want to make sure that you are sharing if you like it, if you love it, even if you hate it. Go ahead and share what you see with your friends and family. You can reach us on Facebook at Intelligence the Podcast, www.gentspodcast.com. We're also on Twitter, Gent Podcasting, and Instagram. Is it the same? Is that right? Gent Podcast? What is it?
YouTube. Gents Podcasting.
Isn't that?
No, you said Gent Podcasting.
Okay, I left an S off, so there's multiple Gents. So there's Gents Podcasting on Instagram and Twitter. So hopefully you are sharing as we build this thing out. We're going to bring more and more to you, more side content and our main content. So look forward to seeing some different things from us, from each of our individual hosts. So excited about that. That's our time, ladies and gentlemen. This is Intelligence, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. We'll see you next week.